Hello and welcome to today's training tip, which is about role play. So some learners love it, some learners hate it, some absolutely refuse to do it. And well, I've had a few light bulb moments myself while taking part in role plays as a learner. So I have to say that I have found huge value in it. But what about role play from the trainer's point of view? So before we go into what it can be good for, let's just look at some of the limitations of it. The main one, I think, is that it can be time consuming. So you need to be really clear on what you're going to do and what you're going to expect others to do, and you need to set and keep to time limits. The roles that you're planning for people to take must be clearly defined. And the players or the actors need to be briefed and also to have time to prepare if you want them to get into some sort of role other than themselves. Some learners may get a bit too dramatic, actually. They can go that way and can detract from the learning points. So you need to keep an eye on that as well. And as we've said, not all learners like role plays. They may not want to participate. They may not be able to participate for some reason. So if you can, try and build in some sort of perhaps an observer role for those people so they can still be included. So I think the message really is that planning is very important. You need to be very clear about what you want to achieve. And you need to make sure that everything that you do in the role play is leading up to that. Okay, so there are different types of role play. You can ask your learners to act out a hypothetical situation. As I said before, make sure you have a clear brief for each role to be played and give them time to prepare. And it is a good idea to road test the brief before using it. Just an example there, I devised a brief once for an appraisal training session for the care sector, where the appraisee that I'd written up the part for wanted to be put on a residential course, and by that I meant that he wanted to go away for a week away from work, on a sort of training jolly as he saw it. But the person who was taking that role assumed that it meant a course on residential care. But the voluntary organisation that he worked for didn't offer residential care. So, there was a lot of confusion. And needless to say, I altered the wording for the next group on that course to make it clearer. You can ask your learners to act out something that actually happened and maybe get the people who hadn't been directly involved to take the roles of others who were. That could be good, for example, in conflict situations at work. All the people who were involved obviously could take the roles as well, and perhaps look at what they might have done differently should that situation happen again. You and others can act out a scenario for the group to observe and for the group to discuss. I've used this type of training as well for training on conflict resolution. And also for appraisal training in the style of the old John Cleese videos, if you remember those, of how not to do things. And tutors can act out a scenario for learners to interact with. So that's slightly different again. It could be that the learners interrupt when they think of something that should be done differently, or even volunteer to take over the role part way through. And a few years ago, I came across a different type of role play, which was just fabulous. But I'll tell you about that in a training tip on another day. So role play is most often used, I suppose, to develop interpersonal skills such as communication, decision-making, conflict resolution, that type of thing. And when used in that way, can bring really can lead to great insights quite often. It's also used, of course, in first aid courses for learners to demonstrate their skills in a simulated situation. It's used widely in the caring professions, the police force, management training, And in itself, it can be a way of perhaps debriefing a situation that's occurred. And it's also good for teaching languages, and the learners can act out buying different goods from a shop or ordering in a restaurant, booking into a hotel, that kind of thing that you do in language classes. And however you use it, the debrief afterwards is as important as the role play itself. And that can bring about a lot of learning through reflection and discussion. If possible, it should be done straight away while it's still fresh in everyone's minds. It can be really valuable in as much as that when the learners are reflecting, they can be drawing conclusions for themselves. And think about what questions you want the learners to consider rather than just send them off to have a little think. Maybe have them listed out on paper so they can think about what happened, why it happened, how it could have been done differently. And very importantly, how it relates back either to perhaps a theory that you've been teaching them or relates back to real work. And if it's been an emotive subject that you've been doing the role play on, some individuals may become upset or distressed. And if you think there's a possibility of that happening, if you can, have somebody else with you to facilitate the group reflection prior to a full class debrief, so that you can spend some time, some one-to-one time, with a person who maybe needs a bit more support. So there isn't really a set in stone, correct way to carry out a role play exercise, but I will just stress again that planning is essential, being clear on the purpose for timing, for devising content, and allowing plenty of time for the debrief at the end. And as with many things in training, it's about doing what's appropriate for your students, for the subject that you're teaching, for the venue you're in, the situation you find yourself in. So I'll be back with another training tip soon. I hope you found that useful, and I'll say bye for now.